Mother, she calls her children. Mother, she calls her children. Mother, she calls her children. Calls us all to hear. Sister, she calls her daughters. Sister, she calls her daughters. Sister, she calls her daughters. Calls us all to heal. Brother, she calls her sons. Brother, she calls her sons. Brother, she calls her sons. Calls us all to heal. I cannot speak of my sexual violence survival story without telling you the story of my mother, or the many women before her in my lineage whose bodies bear the legacy of enslavement and colonization. I cannot speak of our story without telling you the story of Indigenous women, men, and children whose culture, family, and dignity were violated by church and state-sanctioned violence in residential schools. And I cannot speak of our story without telling you the story of the Great Mother, that wild source of all of life whose voice has been silenced and whose earthly body is abused and exploited by her own children who have forgotten how to listen. You see, our survival stories are never just our own. They are the last echoes of a time called the Great Forgetting, a prophesied time which warned that one day the sacred thread woven through all of life would be lost in a fog of collective amnesia that would spread through the Great Mother's children, blinding them with a lust for power and impulse towards division. And on it would go, sowing seeds of violence in war-torn countries, government policies, and entertainment industries, and on it would go, eating its way through drying riverbeds and silent forests. And on it would go, hatred in tow, until humanity would be left with only itself to reckon with. And still, even here, it was said that our story does not end, for in the time of great forgetting, we'll be called to make a choice between the story we have known and the story that could be. For we are more than passive inheritors of this story. We are its destined turning. So when the leaders of this old world attempt to use you in their game of no winners, when they attempt to instill fear in your hearts and separation between your brothers and sisters, when they demand your compliance, your silence, your denial, your shame, the Great Mother calls you to remember your power, to reclaim the freedom she has given us to live the great story that remembers that all of life is sacred, and that a people that honors this is not merely a possibility, but a promise carried by those who choose to wield the pen she has placed in all of her children's hands. For this ancient war will not be won with guns, bombs, or violence. For its victory rests in the hearts of those who choose to rise in love as the eagle soars towards that boundless horizon to become living proof of the Great Mother's truth. So no, I cannot speak of my story without speaking of our story, the one where the Great Mother calls and her children finally listen.